Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Owen Pontius. I will be performing the preliminary matters along with the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers and the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Braden Tours, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Carson Durst, as well as the cross-examination of Skylar Wares, and finally, I will be delivering the closing statements for the plaintiff. Permission to introduce our witnesses at this time, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Quincy Nguyen, and I am Skylar Dakota Weirs today.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Isabel Spencer, and I am Carson Durst.
Good morning, Your Honor, and opposing counsel. My name is Ava Neal, and today I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Okay. Thank you. Defense like to enter their appearances.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Emma Eastland. Excuse me.
That's okay.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Emma Eastland, and today I will be delivering the closing argument as well as the direct examination of Dr. Devin Williams and the cross-examination of Carson Durst. At this time, I'd like to ask for permission from my co-counsel to introduce themselves.
You may.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Aiden Kine, and I will be performing the direct examination of Skylar Weirs and the cross-examination of Dr. Casey Rogers.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Evelyn Clark. I will be performing the direct exam of Blake Doncourt, the cross-exam of Dakota Weirs, and the opening statements for the defense.
At this time, we'd like to ask permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves.
You may.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Jackson Pagano, and I am Blake Doncourt.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I am Jasmine Perez, and I will be portraying Skylar Weirs.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Andrew Sr., and I will be portraying Dr. Devin Williams.
Okay, thank you. Are there any preliminary matters that we need to address before we begin?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff has a few preliminary matters before we start.
Okay.
First, the plaintiff requests that the stipulated facts of the case be submitted to evidence to assist the jury's understanding of the case.
Any objection from the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay.
The plaintiff requests that all witnesses are allowed a copy of personal exhibit packets and personal witness statements nearby for expediency's sake.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
And finally, the plaintiff requests that all extra time from closing statement be reserved for a rebuttal.
Okay, it will be.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything from defense?
Yes, Your Honor. We would ask that, to begin, does yourself and the jury have copies of all exhibits?
Yes.
Would it be possible for expediency's sake, rather than screen sharing the exhibits, our witnesses and the jury and yourself could please refer to the exhibits they have rather than presenting those through the Zoom call?
Any objection from the plaintiffs?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, that's how we'll proceed then.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further preliminary matters from the defense.
Okay. Would plaintiff's attorneys like to present an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, members of the jury. My name is Monsi Guerra, and I, along with my colleagues Braden Tours and Owen Pontius, have the privilege of representing the plaintiff, Ms. Dakota Weirs, in today's trial. The doctrine of negligence does not require the elimination of all risk from the party's conduct, only all unreasonable risk. Unreasonable risk is best defined as a risk that caused foreseeable harm due to conduct. Unreasonable risk is the reason why the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, brings her case to court today. Unreasonable risk is the reason why Ms. Weirs struggles with non-Hodgkin lymphoma and the reason why her dreams and passions have been crushed. Unreasonable risk is best defined as what Lush Fertilizer failed to identify and therefore causing the life of a young woman to be drastically ruined. An unreasonable risk is the reason why Lush Fertilizer will be held accountable and will be charged with the crimes of negligence. Before I get into the evidence, let me tell you a little bit about Ms. Weirs. Ms. Weirs is 20 years of age and loves to play the piano. However, she won't be able to anymore. Prior to being diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, Ms. Weirs was an extremely talented pianist who had high hopes and potential. She was meant to go to Juilliard and was bound for great success, but due to her illness, she was unable to. Everything she had worked towards had been ripped away from her. Ms. Weirs will tell you about her life prior to getting diagnosed and how terribly it's affected her life now. She will also tell you about why exactly Lush Fertilizer is the reason behind her illness. I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing from Ms. Weirs and find that she's a kind and trustworthy person. So today, bringing forth true hard proof of the negligence of Lush Fertilizer, the members of the jury will hear from 3 witnesses today. You will hear from Dakota Weirs, Carson Durst, and expert witness Dr. Casey Rogers. The first witness that will be called today is Dakota Weirs. Dakota Weirs stands here today in court to hold Lush Fertilizer accountable for the unregulated use of Drufo in their product, therefore causing her to fall ill with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The next witness that will be called is Carson Durst. Previously employed at Lush Fertilizer, Carson has seen the development of Drufo and has insight on the possible precautions Lush Fertilizer could and should have taken to protect customers from any possible injury. Durst will explain his own research as well as other studies that back up the claim that Drufo has many carcinogenic qualities. The final witness that will be called is expert witness Dr. Casey Rogers. Rogers has a PhD in agriculture and entomology, as well as a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture and chemistry. He brings forth vital evidence backed by logic and reasoning that prove the inconsistencies in the product Drufo itself and the harmful effect it can have on customers. His studies results will prove the direct correlation between exposure to Drufo and cancer. You will hear from the defense shortly after, and what they aspire, or hope, or anticipate to do today is exculpate Lush Fertilizer from all charges of negligence. However, they will fail to do one very vital thing: tell the full story. They will hide important evidence from you. They will claim that the solid evidence proving Lush Fertilizer's negligence is just manufactured in a desperate attempt to win the case. And in the end, all the defense will show is speculation, conjecture, and reasonable doubt. However, the plaintiff brings full evidence, substantial evidence, that will prove that Lush Fertilizer was in fact negligent. This case is one further than just the negligence of Lush Fertilizer. It's about the life and dreams of a young woman being taken away from her. While Lush Fertilizer may try to hide their negligence with false claims, they won't ever succeed, because today, members of the jury, the plaintiff brings the cold, hard facts of the case and the only likely outcome. At the end, I will return and find that you find in favor of Ms. Weirs and award fair damages for the pain and disability she has suffered at the hands of the defendant. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the defense wish to present an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Ladies and gentlemen, today you will hear that Dakota Weirs played a game of Russian roulette. As you just heard from Ms. Gouda, Dakota Weirs developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma after using many chemicals over a long period of time, just one of which was Lush Fertilizer. However, the plaintiff has not told you the full story. The plaintiff has not told you that you will hear from Dakota Weirs that while working as a landscaper, she used many different fertilizers and not just Lush Fertilizer. You will learn that unlike Drufo, the chemical bonding agent in Lush Fertilizer, many of those other fertilizers contained added pesticides, which have been proven to cause cancer in humans. You will hear that there were clear warning labels on each package of fertilizer, and you will see that warning label. And you will hear that unfortunately, Ms. Weirs chose to ignore any safety warnings when handling fertilizer products on a daily basis for 4 years. Throughout the course of this trial, you are going to hear the other half of the story through Lush Fertilizer's 3 witnesses. First is Mr. Blake Doncourt, the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer. He will tell you that Lush cares passionately about the environment and actually donates 10% of its profits to nonprofit organizations committed to decreasing the world's nitrogen footprint. You will hear that because Lush cares about the environment and its consumers, Lush extensively tested its products to ensure their safety. You will hear that these tests demonstrated that there is no valid scientific evidence showing that Drufo is carcinogenic to humans. Mr. Doncourt will tell you that if any evidence had been brought to him, he would never have put Drufo on the market. You will hear that Lush felt confident putting Drufo directly on the market because it was safe. Finally, Mr. Doncourt will explain that even though Drufo was safe and it wasn't required, Lush Fertilizer put safety warnings on its label and recommended that consumers wear protective gear when using the product just out of an abundance of caution. Second, you will hear from Skylar Weirs, who is an investigative journalist who has written extensively on the health concerns of Drufo. She is also Dakota Weirs' twin sister. You will hear that Skylar Weirs spent almost a year researching whether there is a causal link between Drufo and cancer, and that she found absolutely no conclusive evidence connecting Drufo to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. You will hear that instead, she found abundant research tying other pesticides to cancer, pesticides that are not found in Lush Fertilizer. You will hear that she researched all of this before Dakota Weirs ever developed cancer, so Skylar Weirs has no dog in this fight. Thirdly, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, the leader of Lush Fertilizer's Research and Development Labs and chair of Lush's Ethics Committee. Dr. Williams will tell you that Drufo was designed to prevent the user and the environment from harmful exposure to nitrates and other harmful pesticides. He will explain to you that Drufo is not only non-carcinogenic, but also safer than other fertilizers because it does not need to be used as often. You will hear him testify under oath that Drufo has not been correlated with the statistically significant increase in non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other type of cancer. Dr. Williams will explain to you that any studies claiming that it does are based in unreliable data and unreliable testing. Ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this trial, the judge will instruct you that the plaintiff has the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that Lush Fertilizer failed to use reasonable care in putting its products on the market, and that failure caused Ms. Weirs to develop cancer. We submit to you that the plaintiff will not meet their burden. Because the plaintiff has the burden of proof, they get to present their case first. We ask you to keep an open mind and not come to any conclusions until you have heard from the defense. At the conclusion of this case, my co-counsel Emma Eastland will ask you to find Lush Fertilizer not liable and instead find that Ms. Weirs is responsible for her own injuries. Thank you.
Thank you. The plaintiff wish to present their first witness, to call their first witness.
Yes, Your Honor, we call Dakota Weirs to the stand. Could you please state your full name and spell the last for the court?
My name is Dakota Weirs, W-E-I-R-S.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Can you tell the court why you're here today?
I'm here today to sue Lush Fertilizer for their negligence in using Drufo in their products.
And what is your current occupation?
I am currently unemployed.
Have you had a previous occupation? And if so, where were you employed?
Yes, I was previously employed at Haven Landscaping as a landscaping technician.
How long did you work there?
I worked there ever since I was 14 years old.
And how old are you now?
I'm 20 now.
What were your responsibilities at your job?
At the time, I was too young to operate the heavy machinery, so I was tasked with spreading the grass seed and using fertilizers.
And what type of materials and chemicals did you work with?
I worked with various chemicals, one of which was Lush Fertilizer.
While working with these, were you advised to wear long sleeves, pants, and gloves?
I was by my boss, but it was often too hot to be wearing long sleeves and pants, especially when working in the summer.
And did any of your colleagues who use Lush fertilizer also wear long sleeves, pants, or gloves?
No, my colleagues agreed with me that it was often way too hot to wear anything that was long sleeved, so we didn't wear anything like that.
Were any of your colleagues diagnosed with the same condition that you have?
To my knowledge, none of them were.
Do you regret not wearing protective gear?
I do. It's ruined my life ever since I've gotten my diagnosis. I can't do the things I used to do, and I just feel like I don't really have a future at this point.
I'm sorry, Ms. Weers. What condition do you have?
I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Could you further explain what that is?
It's a non-hereditary form of cancer that's caused me many that has caused me to have many symptoms. My lymph nodes swell to an unbearable level. I can't sit for long periods of time because I bruise easily. I'm often fatigued and I have shortness of breath.
Prior to being diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, what did you do?
As you've heard previously, I had a job at Haven Landscaping. Outside of that, I was very passionate about the piano. I even played so well that I won a full ride scholarship to Juilliard, which is this really prestigious music college in New York. I also, helped out with my community by volunteering as well as participating in school clubs like National Honor Society.
And why won't you be able to attend Juilliard anymore?
The rigorous schedule that Juilliard requires is simply something I can't do anymore. My fatigue and shortness of breath makes it impossible to study for long periods of time. And when I sit at the piano bench, I bruise easily.
And how did this affect you mentally?
I felt like I was ruined. I learned the piano from my grandfather, who I was very close to when I was young. He taught me how to play it, and I cultivated that passion all the way into where I was playing almost professionally. Now that I can't play piano anymore and I lost my scholarship, it feels like my connection to him has been severed all over again, which is really sad.
And ultimately, what effect has non-Hodgkin lymphoma had on your life?
It's hurt me both mentally and physically. Outside of my physical conditions, I've been feeling very depressed because, again, I can't do the things I used to feel a passion about, and I feel like there's nothing I can do in my future. There's no hope for it.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Ms. Weers. What is the reason behind your condition?
It was the Drufo that Lush Fertilizer uses in their products.
What is Drufo?
It's this bonding agent they use in all their fertilizers.
Ms. Weers,
Objection, Your Honor, that is speculation.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the objection.
That is speculation.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor, this is not speculation, as my witness works with Lush Fertilizer and knows the ingredients, especially considering the amount of time she spent around Haven Landscaping and the fertilizers, and would be able to know that Drufo is what caused her illness.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
She testified that Drufo is used in all of Lush's products, and she does not have the knowledge as an expert witness of all of the products that Lush uses and has ingredients for.
Okay, so the objection is sustained, but you can lay a foundation.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Weers, do you have a copy of Exhibit 1 available to you?
I do.
Yeah, Your Honor, do you have a copy of Exhibit 1 available to you?
Yes.
Let the record show that this is a clean and unmarked copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 1. I request permission to show Exhibit 1 to Dakota Weers.
You may.
Ms. Weers, could you please identify what Exhibit 1 is?
This is the label of the Lush fertilizer I used at my job.
Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 1 into evidence at the time. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, Exhibit 1 is admitted.
On this label, what do you notice, Ms. Weers?
I noticed there's some recommendations that this product could cause eye irritation. That's about it.
Under the label ingredients, does the exhibit state that Drufo is used in this product?
Yes, it's the first active ingredient in the list.
And could you please read out loud what is under the title hazards?
Keep out of reach of children.
Are there any warnings that under that title that elucidates the clear dangers of the Drufo used in the product?
No, there's nothing saying that it could possibly cause cancer.
Could you please read out loud the first sentence of the user safety recommendations?
As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin.
It states, as with any fertilizer, but does it state anything showing the clear difference between Lush fertilizer and any fertilizer due to the use of Drufo?
No.
And Ms. Spears, could you also please read out loud the caution part of the label?
Causes eye irritation. Avoid contact with eyes of clothing.
Does this part tell you to avoid clothing?
I'm not really sure. Because of the spelling error, it's not really clear what it wants me to do.
What is this label trying to tell you, the consumer, in terms of protective clothing?
Because of how it's confusingly worded, I don't really understand it. It's very unclear and could possibly be misleading.
And could you please also read right under the logo?
For use on lawn, turf, and weed control.
Does it specify that this product must be used outdoors?
No.
Does it specify anywhere on this label that Drufo must be used outdoors?
No.
So would there have been any issue with you using the product indoors?
Nothing that can be seen from this label.
Ms. Weers, do you also have a copy of Exhibit 2 available to you?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, do you have a copy as well?
Yes.
Let the record show that this is a clean and unmarked copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 2. I request permission to show Exhibit 2 to Dakota Weers.
You may.
Ms. Weers, could you please identify what Exhibit 2 is?
It's a list of the ingredients in France's version of Lush fertilizer.
Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 2 into evidence at the time. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this exhibit is hearsay because this exhibit was found on a Google search. We have no way to verify the authenticity of the label. And in addition, it was translated through Google Translate. We also do not have any way to authenticate that the translation is accurate.
Any response?
Your Honor, I laid the foundation for the ingredients using Exhibit 1, and the authenticity therefore has been stipulated from the exact label of Lush fertilizer from prior questioning. So there would be no issue with bringing up the same ingredients list, just in another language for Exhibit 2.
So the objection would be sustained, but for purposes of this competition, I'll admit Exhibit 2.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Weers, compared to the exhibit of the ingredients of Lush fertilizer used in the United States, what is the difference of the ingredients of Lush fertilizer used in France?
In France, there's no Drufo.
And why is this?
It's because it's dangerous.
What other countries have outlawed the use of Drufo in Lush fertilizer?
In addition to France, Haiti, Liberia, Canada, Congo, and Cote d'Ivoire have all banned it as well.
And is this for the same reason that France does not use it?
Yes.
And does Lush fertilizer still use this product regardless of the known dangers?
Yes, it's still in their fertilizers.
And does Lush fertilizer warn their consumers about possible dangers?
No.
Ms. Weers, is Lush fertilizer a negligent company?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. This is lack of personal knowledge.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is why my client brings her case to court today. It's in terms of negligence, and she would be able to attest to if she believes that Lush fertilizer is a negligent company or not.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
This is also the ultimate issue of the case, and she is not permitted to make that allegation, or she's not able to come to that conclusion for the jury.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Weirs. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for being here, and I'm very sorry for the conditions that have led you here. I understand you're here today because of your non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and you believe the sole cause is your use of lush fertilizer, correct?
Correct. The Drufo within its products have caused my condition.
You came in contact with this product when you worked as a landscaping technician for Haven Landscaping, is that right?
That is correct.
You worked for Haven Landscaping for several years?
Yes, since I was about 14 years old.
And during that time, lush fertilizer wasn't the only fertilizer that you used, was it?
No, I've used other fertilizers.
You used several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals in the several years that you worked as a landscaping technician?
That is correct. I used other chemicals in addition to lush fertilizer.
But you were the only one of your colleagues that developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
To my knowledge.
And you only chose to sue lush fertilizer?
That is because it is the only fertilizer I came in contact with that used Drufo, and it is Drufo that caused my condition. None of the other fertilizers I worked with ever contained Drufo or showed any signs of having a link to cancer, which is why I believe Drufo is the one that caused my condition, as it is the only one that has been shown to have a link to cancer.
And you chose to sue lush fertilizer after watching a story on the news about Drufo, correct?
That was where I started, but I then looked further into, the ingredients list and other things, and that's how I came to my conclusion.
I'd like to talk to you now about the precautions that you chose not to take as a landscape technician. Isn't it true that you were always told to wear long pants at your work while we're using fertilizer?
Yes, my boss did tell me that, but my colleagues and I all agreed that it was too hot to wear, the long sleeve shirts and pants, so we often did not.
And isn't it true that you were always told to wear long sleeves while we're using fertilizer at your work?
I'm sorry, you cut out there at the end. I couldn't hear the full question.
Sorry. Isn't it true that you were always told to wear long sleeves while using fertilizer at your work?
Yes, that was what my boss told me, but again, my colleagues and I all agreed it was too hot to wear the long sleeves and pants.
And isn't it true that you were always told to wear gloves while using fertilizer at your work?
Yes, I was told to wear gloves.
And isn't it true that you were always told to wear a mask when using fertilizer at your job?
Yes.
Are you aware of any warning labels on the lush fertilizer product, Ms. Weirs?
I know there is a warning label warning against eye irritation, but nothing warning about the cancer that it could have caused.
Do you still have a copy of Exhibit 1 in front of you, Ms. Weirs?
Yes, I do.
Would you please read out loud in the second column under user safety recommendations?
Could you direct what how much I'm reading, if that's possible?
The whole second column under user safety recommendations, please.
Okay. As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator and 95 face mask is recommended. Follow manufacturer's instructions for cleaning/maintaining personal protective equipment, PPE. Users should wash hands before and after use of this product.
Ms. Weirs, despite these warnings, you only wore shorts and t-shirts when you used fertilizer at Haven Landscaping, correct?
That's because it said user safety recommendations, and since it was only warning against eye irritation, I assumed that if I was just going to keep it out of my eye, there was no need to follow the recommendations. It didn't say anything about about it being a requirement.
Is that a yes to my question, Ms. Weirs?
Yes.
And you didn't cover your face either, did you?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered, this line of questioning has gone on with the same questions for quite a while.
Response?
Your Honor, this question is separate from the other questions. It is laying foundation for the line of questioning leading to the fact that Dakota Weirs is responsible for her injuries.
The objection's overruled. You may continue.
So, Ms. Weirs, you didn't cover your face either, did you?
No.
You were warned about safety procedures around Lush fertilizer, but you did not follow them. Is that correct?
I was given a recommendation, which I didn't see was necessary, especially with the hot weather at that time. What my boss told me was for all fertilizers, but again, my colleagues and I all agreed it was too hot to wear anything, so none of us did.
Thank you for your explanation, Ms. Weirs, but my question called for a yes or no. You were warned about safety procedures around Lush fertilizer, but you chose not to follow them. Is that right?
Yes, I was given recommendations.
And you never sued your employer, Havens Landscaping, for not ensuring that you wore the necessary protective gear every day at work?
No, I did not sue them. I'm suing Lush today.
I'd now like to talk to you about the warning labels on the other fertilizers that you used. In addition to Lush fertilizer, the other fertilizers and chemicals that you used often had some sort of warning on the packaging?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of the witness, never in my witness's affidavit did she mention warning labels on other fertilizers that she used.
Response?
Your Honor and opposing counsel, if you could please turn to Dakota Weir's witness statement on lines 89 through 90. It specifically talks about the warning labels on the other fertilizers that were used at Havens Landscaping.
Your Honor, if I may have a response.
You may.
And I'd also like to say that this is assuming facts, not evidence, since there is no warning labels of the other fertilizers in court today that my witness can attest to or look into to state if there was even a warning label on them.
Okay, so there's two objections. One I'll rule on and one I won't. The first one is outside the scope of direct. That objection's overruled. The other objection is beyond the scope of the program, and that's up to the scoring panel. So you may continue.
Ms. Weirs, in addition to Lush fertilizer, the other fertilizers and chemicals that you used often had some sort of warning on the packaging, correct?
Yes, there was warning labels on those ones as well.
And some of these chemicals instructed that the product should only be used outdoors?
Yeah, those ones had it, but Lush fertilizers did not.
And despite these warnings, you often used those products indoors, is that right?
Yes, that's what my company wanted me to do, so.
Some of these warning labels instructed that mask or eye coverings were necessary?
Yes.
So you neglected to follow more than one company's warnings on their fertilizer labels, is that right?
I chose to not wear protective clothing as it was often too hot and none of my colleagues did, so I never saw a reason for me to do it.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Brief redirect. Ms. Weirs, was Lush fertilizer the only fertilizer that used Drufo?
That is correct.
And if you could refer to Exhibit 1 once again. Could you please read right next to causes eye irritation under the caution label?
Avoid contact with eyes of clothing.
This part tells you to, continue, Ms. Weirs.
Yeah, again, there's a spelling error, so I'm sorry if it doesn't make sense.
That's okay, Ms. Weirs, but does this part tell you to avoid clothing?
It's very confusingly worded. I'm not quite sure what it's telling me. If I read it at first, I might think so, yes.
And does this label state that you don't like that? Does this label state specifically that you must use Lush outdoors?
No, it says nothing about like banning it from being used indoors.
So you would be able to use Lush indoors, correct?
Based on this label, yes.
Objection, Your Honor, leading the witness.
Sustained.
No further questions, Your Honor.
May this witness step down. Plaintiffs like to call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff would now like to call witness Carson Durst to the stand. If I may have 1 second to rename myself.
You may.
All right. Thank you so much for being here today, Ms. Durst. Could you please state your full legal name and spell the last for the record?
Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Why are you here today?
I'm here to testify the truth about Blake Doncourt and his company, Lush Fertilizer.
And what is the nature of your relationship with the defendant, Blake Doncourt?
Well, Charles and I, which is Blake Doncourt's son, we were very close when we were younger. We played on a traveling soccer team, and because of this, our families were very close.
And could you tell me a little bit about how your career began?
Well, right before I graduated from college, I was having some issues finding a job, and I talked to Charles about this, and he had told me about his father's company hiring interns. So I decided to apply, and I became an intern.
And to your perception, how did this job fare out for you in the beginning?
I rose through the ranks pretty quickly. After just about 3 months of having the internship, I became a full employee, and I was the product development engineer.
So based on your perception of the work environment, why do you believe you received this promotion to product engineer so quickly?
I believe I was just better at what I was doing at that time than my coworkers.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. And what were some products you worked on as lead product manager?
Well, the biggest product I worked on was called Drufo.
And what is Drufo to your knowledge?
Drufo is a bonding agent that was used in Lush's fertilizers, and it was used to keep their products, the fertilizers, together.
And to your knowledge as product manager, what was the value of Drufo to Lush Fertilizer as a product?
Objection, Your Honor. This witness was asked to testify in her capacity as product manager, but she was never a product manager. She was a product development engineer. And therefore, I do not believe she can testify on the value of a product to the defendant's company.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. I am simply asking my witness to attest to their perception of the relationship between the product that they managed and the company they worked for, so they would have beyond sufficient insight into the value of this as a product engineer who deals directly with the product and its management.
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly.
Go ahead.
This witness did not manage the product. She was a product development engineer, not a product development manager. She did not manage this product. Thank you.
The objection's overruled. The witness can testify what her perception of the value of her contribution to the company is.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will restate my question. So what was the value of Drufo to Lush Fertilizer as a product?
Well, Drufo increased the longevity and the texture of Lush's fertilizers, which put it above, at the time, its competitors.
And so what was your task in this assignment with Drufo?
I was tasked with researching Drufo and its chemical components.
And how did you begin this research?
Well, Lush Fertilizer and my part of the company had an in-house study. And I, before that, had also looked into it by researching a specific finding from England, where a woman found out that Drufo could be, the specific chemical in Drufo, could be carcinogenic in rats.
Wow, and did you document this concerning finding anywhere?
I did. We keep notebooks, or at the time we kept notebooks that would hold all of the information that we found. That way our managers could look through them, and that's where I put the information that I found.
Your Honor, could you verify that you have a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit 3 in front of you?
I do.
Ms. Durst, do you have a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit 3 in front of you?
Yes, one moment, sorry. I have it.
Could you please identify this document?
Yes, it is the study I found from England.
Your Honor, I now move to enter Exhibit 3 into evidence. The authenticity of this document has been stipulated.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, on two different fronts. The first being this document is hearsay. While the witness did find this document, they did not write it or participate in the study over which it was written. And secondly, under Rule 106, studies presented for use in the courtroom must be complete, and this is not a complete copy of that study, rather a summary.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. In relation to the hearsay objection, this evidence is permissible under Rule 803.5, past recollection recorded, because we have already established the foundation that this piece of evidence was documented into a journal as a part of a standard practice that concerned my witness's job and related duties. This evidence is crucial to laying the foundation of this case and my witness's subsequent behavior as the motivation of that behavior. And then in regards to the second objection, again, I'd just like to reiterate that this piece of evidence is not necessarily being used for scientific matters, but that it is being used as evidence of something that occurred within my witness's story and is directly pertinent to the case and their behavior.
Anything else? All right. This objection would be sustained, but for purposes of this competition, the court's going to allow the exhibit.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, could you please read the title at the top, the study title at the top of this page?
Lifespan exposure to low doses of C3NO9P beginning during early life increases cancer effects in rats.
And based on what you read and are familiar with, could you please summarize this study's conclusion, Colin?
It basically is saying that the results of the carcinogenicity of the long-term effects of C3NO9P have some sort of increased effects of cancer in rats with the carcinogenicity, and specifically could be higher than the normal intake for humans.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. So after finding the study, did you conduct any of your own studies with the scientific team into the safety of Drufo?
We conducted an in-house study. However, after I put the information into my notebook, it stopped there for the most part. My managers didn't really do anything.
And so did any findings arise from your research team during this in-house study that you mentioned that sparked your concerns?
Again, just the findings that it could be carcinogenic in humans and rats. And we raised those concerns during a meeting with Jerry Langley and Alex Monroe, in which they were both listening intently and neither one did anything with—
Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is hearsay. We have no way of proving the veracity of the witness's claims. Additionally, we don't have any written recollection of this meeting, so it's therefore hearsay.
I'm sorry, it's what?
Therefore hearsay. My apologies.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
This is permissible under the hearsay rule 801C, past recollection recorded. My witness is simply testifying as to her knowledge of an event that she was present at that concerned her job and her duties. And she's testifying as to the presence, not necessarily the behavior of anyone in the room.
Your Honor, if I may briefly respond to that.
You may.
The witness did not record this, so it can't be a past recollection recorded.
Okay. Your Honor, this was recorded in her affidavit, her recollection that they were both present in the room during this meeting that she attended.
Okay, the presence of other people in a room is not hearsay, so the objection's overruled. She has not yet started to talk about what others have said, rather what they perhaps did. So I'm going to allow it, but cautiously to plaintiff's counsel, so long as there's not anything that's being offered about what other witnesses said without a proper foundation. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So after you conducted an in-house study with your scientific team, did any research from your scientific team come up that sparked your concern?
We found that the carcinogens in rats and humans was very concerning, and so when we had placed that in our notebooks, normally Jerry Langley will bring our notebooks together and we'll put it all in one specific document and then post that, if you will, or release that. However, that was not put into that final document. None of the findings that would be considered negative were put into that document.
But so more specifically from your scientific team, did any scientists find any data that was brought up during this meeting that you mentioned?
I'm sorry, you restate the question. I'm having a
were there any scientists that brought up anything during this meeting?
There were certain scientists who did speak up during the meeting.
And what did they believe?
They also had believed that it was carcinogenic in rats and humans.
Your Honor, I'd like to renew my hearsay objection. I believe that the witness is now testifying to the contents of the meeting and what other people said during that meeting. So I would renew my hearsay objection.
Response?
Your Honor, while I understand this hearsay objection, as manager of the team and the scientist, she's again simply testifying to a concern that was brought up directly relating to the study. And because this was corroborated in her affidavit, we don't believe that it is necessarily hearsay, but rather an account, a past recollection recorded of something that occurred.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Go ahead.
Past recollection recorded is for documents kept in regular business or like personal things like a diary. And this is, the plaintiff is referring to a affidavit specifically drawn up for this lawsuit, which would not be a regularly kept document. Additionally, the witness's affidavit cannot be used to negate a hearsay objection. Thank you.
The objection sustained.
I'll move on, Your Honor. Were any of your managers attending, I'm sorry, I will move on. So was a conclusion report published on this study?
There was no conclusion that it directly stated anything about carcinogenic or the carcinogenicity of rats or humans in this study.
And who was in charge of publishing this conclusion?
That was Jerry Langley. He always would put all of our findings together.
And is this the same person that you mentioned attended the meeting that you were at?
That's true, and as well as Alex Monroe.
And to your knowledge, were any further studies launched into the possible carcinogenicity of Truffaut after these two supposed concerns arose?
Other than that, no.
And so referring back to the conclusion report that you mentioned, did it suggest any possible way to mitigate a risk if there were to be one?
It said that you were able to, if when you were producing Truffaut, if you were able to bake it, you may be able to decrease the possibility of the carcinogenicity and the effects that it would have on rats or humans. So if you were able to precisely bake the Truffaut, it would negate that.
And to your knowledge, did Truffaut ever conduct a study to assess whether baking was a viable means of mitigating this risk that they supposed in their report?
I am not, and no, they did not.
And did your research team ever find any evidence that showing that baking Truffaut would eliminate the properties?
No, we did not.
And to your knowledge, did less fertilizer even bother to bake Truffaut?
No, they did not.
So what was your personal impression of the conclusion report?
Personally, I felt like they being Lush Fertilizer was withholding information that their different product development engineers had researched and found. Whether they believed that that was real or not, it was something that we found and had placed in our notebooks. So I felt like it was wrong for them to withhold that information that we found.
Thank you so much, Ms. Durst, for testifying today. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Ms. Durst. You used to be best friends with Charles Doncourt, correct?
That's correct. We were on a traveling soccer team when we were younger.
And it's true that Blake Doncourt, Charles's father, is the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
That is correct.
You attend, in addition to being on a traveling soccer team with Charles, you also attended Sunday meals with Doncourt, correct?
That's correct. His family was like my own family, same way around.
And took vacations with them to their lake house?
That is also correct. Like I said, we were best friends.
And you would agree that they were like family?
Yes, I did say that. We were like family.
In fact, you would even describe Charles and Blake as the family you never had, correct?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
I'm sorry. I'll lean in a little. Sorry. You would even describe Blake and Charles as the family you never had, correct?
That could be said, yes.
It's true that you would say that, though.
Then yes, I would say that.
You went to college with Charles, right?
That is correct.
And shortly before graduation, you still hadn't found a job.
Yes, I hadn't been able to find a job, so I was speaking to Charles about my concerns about not being able to find a job.
And it's true that you weren't the top of your class in college, right?
I wasn't at the top of my class, but I believe I had, like I said earlier, that I am able to prove myself later at Lush Fertilizer.
So while you were home for spring break, you told Charles about your problems finding post-graduation employment?
Yes, that's one, yes.
And Charles told you that Lush Fertilizer was hiring summer interns?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Sorry. Charles told you that Lush Fertilizer was hiring summer interns?
Yes, Charles had told me that.
Charles didn't just tell you that, though. He also told you that his dad, Blake Doncourt, would pull some strings for you at Lush Fertilizer.
Well, we were close at the time, so yes.
And you got that job?
Yes, I became an intern, and then after 3 months of being able to prove myself, I got a full-time job as product development engineer.
Even though positions like the internship are hard to come by for people like you with no experience.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation. My witness wouldn't necessarily know the job opportunities and the likelihood of acquiring that job. That's not really within their knowledge.
Response?
I would say that it's reasonable for this witness, as a recent graduate with a degree in chemical engineering, would know the career prospects of somebody entering a field related to chemical engineering. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask this witness to testify on that matter.
Okay, the objection is sustained.
And in this position, you were tasked with researching Truffaut, right?
That is correct.
You found one study indicating that Truffaut might be carcinogenic in rats?
Yes, that's the one that I found from England.
But you never found any studies relating to carcinogenicness in humans, did you?
I'm sorry, did you say in humans?
In humans, you never found any studies indicating carcinogenicity in humans?
Other than the one that I found from England with the rats. Other than that, no.
And it's true that that study also doesn't mention anything about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
It didn't say anything about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but it did speak about the carcinogenicity, and I wasn't really able to find anything else.
So you never found any studies that concerned either non-Hodgkin's lymphoma developing from Truffaut or human carcinogenicity developing from Truffaut?
Objection, Your Honor. It's a compound question. Could opposing counsel please break that up into two more digestible questions?
Okay, counsel, can you rephrase your questions?
It's true that you found a study that confirmed neither of the two testing requirements that I previously asked you about.
That's true.
Okay. I would like to shift your attention to your work performance at Lush Fertilizer. Towards the end of your employment, you received less than favorable performance reviews, correct?
That is correct, but I also was still performing at the same level that I had before, so I don't really see why I was getting lower reviews. I have an idea, but I believe that I was still performing at my same level that I had been when I had been moved up to product development engineer.
In fact, you received an abysmal performance review in early 2005.
That is correct, but at the same thing, I believe that I was still performing at my same level.
But you weren't immediately fired following this review.
I was not immediately fired.
You ended up working for Lush until late 2006.
That is correct.
So despite these scathing performance reviews, Lush still kept you on as an employee for almost 2 years.
That is correct, but I also, again, feel like I was still performing for myself at the right level.
It's true that your work was being criticized as being of lower quality, correct?
Yes, that was the case, yes.
And your colleagues began to confront you regarding your contributions to work projects?
That is correct.
And you were accused of skating along and not pulling your weight?
That is also correct. However, again, I still feel like I was performing at a proper level of where I should have been.
Furthermore, you were accused of being untouchable in the workplace due to your relationships with Blake and Charles Doncourt.
That's true. However, that's out of my control whether or not they're feeling a certain way about me or not.
You no longer work at Lush, do you?
I don't. I work for Terrace Greenery.
In fact, before you were fired by Lush, you started looking for another job, didn't you?
Before I was hired for Lush?
Before you were fired by Lush.
Oh, sorry. That is correct. I wanted to be able to still be able to grow as an employee, even if I was taken, or even if I was let go from my position.
You had already been hired by Terrace Greenery prior to your firing from Lush, correct?
Again,
Argumentative.
Any response?
This is not argumentative. I'm trying to speak more clearly because the witness can't hear me through my microphone.
The objection's overruled. You may continue.
In fact, you had already been hired by Terrace Greenery prior to being fired by Lush.
Yes, because I wanted to be able to still be able to make money, grow as a person, grow as an employee, and I still wanted to perform at a job that was similar to what I had before.
And it's true that Terrace Greenery is Lush Fertilizer's biggest competition.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation as to matters relating to an industrial scope. My witness would have no insight into, again, these job dynamics.
Response?
So this is directly within the witness's knowledge. She would have known the relationship between these two companies due to their link between each other in their industry. Additionally, she left one company for the other, so she should know the status between them. And it goes to show her bias in testifying in this court case today.
Okay, so either you can rephrase the question or you can lay a foundation, but the objection is sustained.
It's true that Terrace Greenery is a rivaling fertilizer company, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Again, my witness would have no information as to this. She's not an expert witness that can speculate as to a rather subjective relationship between two companies. She wouldn't possess the expertise.
Sorry, my apologies. Your Honor, may I respond to that?
Sure.
This witness would have direct relationship that these two companies are rivals in their field because they are both fertilizer companies. And what the witness mentioned in her affidavit is a incredibly small field. So it's more than reasonable to expect that this witness would understand the relationship between these two companies, at least to this degree that they were rivals.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, Your Honor, competition is not grounds for speculation of a rivalry. That's a specific subjective relationship. Competition is an objective category of a company's interaction with each other.
Okay. There's still the foundation. There is no foundation for this witness's knowledge. You can either lay that foundation, rephrase your question, or move on. The objection is sustained.
Ms. Durst, it's true that Terrace Greenery and Lush Fertilizer are competitors in the same incredibly small field.
That is correct. They both produce fertilizers in this way, yes.
And knowing that these two are competitors in the field, you still accepted a product development engineer position at Terrace Greenery?
Well, since it's an incredibly small field, I didn't have a ton of choices. So I felt like I would be able to grow the best at Terrace Greenery since it's such a small area for work.
Even though your degree in chemical engineering will allow you to reasonably take much more positions than just those in fertilizer.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Again, this question is asking my witness to speculate as to the possible prospects of her job. But again, this would be a future tense question and cannot be corroborated.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's true that you left Lush for Terrace Greenery because you thought it would anger Blake.
That was 16 years ago, but at the time I did believe, I was hurt, and at the time I did believe that it was wrong of Blake to let me go. However, that was 16 years ago, so at the time, yes. However, now I don't feel that way anymore. I don't have any opinion, if you will.
It's true that you said that it's true that you said you left your job at Lush for the one at Terrace because you thought it would get Blake's goat, correct?
That's correct. I said that 16 years ago, but that's correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. A brief redirect.
You may.
Ms. Durst, the events and the negligence that you have testified to today, when did those occur?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, so the conduct of the company that you worked at that you testified today, when did that occur in relation to your performance reviews dropping?
That was happening when I first became an employee at Lush Fertilizer. It was 2003, and then my performance started dropping in 2006.
And so everything you witnessed, was that before your reviews dropped?
Everything that I had witnessed and found about the carcinogenicity in rats was found prior to my performance reviews dropping.
And your performance reviews dropped after you published that conclusion report, is that?
So I didn't publish it. I had put it in the notebook, but it technically was seen by all of my managers, specifically Jerry Langley, who was going to publish the findings that my other coworkers and I had found. But yes.
And so do you believe that you would have been biased at that time if it had occurred afterwards?
I believe that I wasn't, could you repeat the question? Sorry, I don't want to
Yes,
word it
do you
wrong.
believe that you would have any bias against Lush Fertilizer if that, during your studies, if your performance reviews had dropped after the study?
I don't believe that I'd have any bias given that I believed that I was working at the same level that I already was. So I don't feel like that would have been a issue to have, if you know what I mean, because I wouldn't have had to deal with the possibility of being fired for getting poor performance reviews. However, I was already still performing at the level that I normally would.
Thank you. No further questions, Ron.
May this witness step down?
Your Honor, could I ask for a brief moment to fix our audio issues?
You may.
Thank you. Our coach is in the room just to fix the audio connection. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Will you ask them to admit me?
While they're fixing that, could I please get a quick time check for the rest of the plaintiff's direct?
Could we get, oh, never mind. We're good. Thank you. All right, we should be good now. Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Plaintiffs like to call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand at this time. Hello, Dr. Rogers. Please state your first and last name, spelling the latter for the record.
My name is Dr. Casey Rogers. Last name spelled Rogers.
What is your current occupation, Dr. Rogers?
I'm currently a professor at UC Berkeley teaching 3 classes.
And what fields do you teach in?
I teach in the fields of agriculture and entomology.
And what did you do prior to your position at UC Berkeley?
Prior to my position, I was a student there.
And what degrees do you hold from UC Berkeley?
I currently hold my PhD in agriculture and entomology from UC Berkeley.
And did you pursue any other forms of education before your position there?
Yes, not only my Bachelor's of Science in Agriculture and Chemistry, but I was also a research analyst for a multinational chemical corporation.
And what was your main area of research during this time?
My main area of study was the effects on people's health of consistent exposure to chemicals such as Truffaut.
And what is the formal name of this field, Dr. Rogers?
The formal name of this field is toxicology.
And has this experience given you any experience in expert advisory before this day?
Absolutely. Not only has my work been used in research and litigation and advisory boards, it provides me with a wealth of information in which I can testify.
Do you have any published works that can give insight into your qualifications?
Yes, I do. My curriculum vitae discusses my educational and professional background, and I also have a list of all of my written works.
Do you have Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7 accessible to you right now?
Yes, I do.
Could you please tell me what these documents are?
These documents are my curriculum vitae and my list of all of my written works.
Your Honor, we now move to submit Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7 into evidence. The authenticity of these exhibits has been stipulated.
Any objection?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, 6 and 7 are admitted.
Now that your qualifications have been outlined, we now also move to classify Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert witness in the fields of horticulture, entomology, and toxicology.
Any objection?
Your Honor, this time the defense would like to perform a brief law here.
You may.
Good morning, Dr. Rogers. First, you are not a medical doctor, is that correct?
Although I'm not a medical doctor, I do have a PhD in the required fields to testify here.
You did not go to medical school, true?
I did not, but I still have a wealth of information from which I can draw upon.
That's true, right? Yes.
Correct.
You do not have a medical license, correct?
I need no medical license to provide my expert opinion regarding toxicology because of my experience in such fields.
Is that no or yes?
I do not have any medical license.
You never diagnosed a patient with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, true?
I did not diagnose Miss Weirs with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. However, looking through her medical records, I have become aware that she was diagnosed with such a disease.
In fact, you've never diagnosed a patient with any type of cancer, true?
I need not diagnose anyone to understand the effects of chemicals on the human body, which I am here to explain.
That's true, correct?
Correct.
You do not have a degree in toxicology, correct?
Although I do not have a degree in toxicology, I have done my study regarding toxicology and the effects of chemicals on the human body.
You do not hold any certification in toxicology, true?
I have no certification in toxicology, however, I have much experience in that field through my work as a research analyst for a multinational chemical corporation.
Your Honor, the defense has an objection to Dr. Rogers testifying in the field of toxicology because he has no prior training or certification. And also, we anticipate that he will render opinions regarding medical diagnosis and causation. And for this, we ask that such testimony be prohibited.
Your Honor, may I respond to this objection?
Sure.
Pursuant to Rule 702, they do not need any formal education. Rather, they just need to be trained and have experience within the field and prove that they have knowledge within the case. And I have submitted the curriculum vitae, which outlines exactly how Dr. Casey Rogers has dealt with toxicology before in the past.
Can I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, Dr. Rogers doesn't have any training at all in the field of toxicology. So therefore, he cannot testify. She cannot testify, nor experience in the field of toxicology. So therefore, she cannot testify.
Your Honor, in the pretrial matters, it has been outlined that Rule 702 does not need a specific degree, training certificate, or anything of such, just knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education.
All right, Dr. Rogers will be qualified as an expert in horticulture, entomology, and toxicology.
Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on to the case at hand, when did you first become familiar with Dakota Weirs?
When I was asked to testify here.
And where did you start in the research for this case?
I started by overlooking Miss Weirs' medical records.
And what did you find there?
She was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And what in your research have you found to be directly related to non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Consistent exposure to the carcinogens in Drufo.
And how did you come to this conclusion?
I came to the conclusion that Drufo is carcinogenic through my study.
Please very briefly describe the setup of this study.
My study contained 3 groups. One who was never exposed to Drufo, one who was occasionally exposed to Drufo, and one that was consistently exposed to Drufo. And my results proved the carcinogenicity of Drufo.
So what initially brought Drufo to your attention to be tested?
My attention was first brought to it when it was released to market, and I, in my professional opinion, believed it to be rushed.
So in your expert opinion, do you believe that Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is directly related and has a causal link to Drufo?
Objection, Your Honor.
Yes.
This calls for medical causation. And the witness has not been entered as an expert in medical diagnoses or causation.
Response?
This witness has been formally admitted as an expert in the field of toxicology, which is the direct effect of chemicals on the body, which is Drufo to Dakota Weirs.
The objection is sustained.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Dr. Rogers. You talked a lot about your study on Drufo. That study was never peer-reviewed, correct?
My study was not peer-reviewed, however, correlated with many other studies, finding similar results.
So your study was not peer-reviewed, is that correct?
It was not peer-reviewed.
You decided to do your own study on the safety of Drufo because you have been hearing about the potentially negative effects of the substance. Is that true?
Yes, that is the case.
Isn't it true then, Dr. Rogers, that you already had the belief that Drufo may be carcinogenic in humans before you even started your study?
I proceeded with my study, attempting to avoid all confirmation bias.
Let's talk now about how your study was conducted. First, your study did not compare the instances of cancer in farmers and gardeners who used Drufo to the instances of cancer in farmers and gardeners who did not. Is that true?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Your study did not compare the instances of cancer in farmers and gardeners who used Drufo to the instances of cancer in farmers and gardeners who did not. Is that true?
Although the occupations of those in my various trial groups did vary, the only variable that truly mattered in this situation was Drufo itself, because other chemicals that these farmers and gardeners were consistently in exposure to did not have the same concerns of being carcinogenic in rats or banned in other countries. Therefore, they mattered little to what I saw as the results of my study.
So, Dr. Rogers, you're saying that other fertilizers aren't carcinogenic?
Other fertilizers have far more studies to their benefit than to their detriment, and Drufo has had many studies to its detriment.
So others fertilizers don't have any at all relation to cancer?
I do not believe I can make a statement regarding all fertilizers ever. However, because based on what I've seen, most other fertilizers have been studied with far more consistency and thoroughness than Drufo.
Let's talk now about the recommendations you made out of the results of your study. First, you recommend that anybody working with Drufo should wear an N95 face mask. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
You recommend that anybody working with Drufo should wear long sleeves and long pants. Is that true?
Yes, that is the case.
Were you present in the courtroom earlier today?
Yes, I was.
Did you hear Miss Weirs testify that she often ignored the warning to wear long sleeves and long pants?
Yes, however, in Ms. Weirs' condition, in the heat and consistent other atmospheric conditions, she was not in any position to be able to use those protective equipments with consistency.
Dr. Rogers, your position is that Mrs. Weirs bears no responsibility in his decision to disregard these safety recommendations. Is that true?
That is correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
A brief redirect. Starting, Dr. Casey Rogers, did you have a control group within your study?
I did, in fact.
And then why did you test Drufo specifically other than these other environmental factors?
Other environmental factors had little bearing on my experiment because they had already been thoroughly studied and proved non-carcinogenic.
And finally, as an expert advisor that you have had previous experience, do you address the companies on their safety recommendations or do you direct the consumers directly?
I make recommendations to corporations.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. May this witness step down? Do the plaintiffs have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, there's no further witnesses from the plaintiff.
The defense would like to present a case.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Mr. Blake Doncourt to the stand.
Okay.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself, spelling your last name for the jury.
My name is Blake Doncourt, Doncourt.
Could you please describe your occupation to the jury?
I'm currently the CEO of Lush Fertilizers Incorporated.
Exactly what does Lush Fertilizer do?
Lush Fertilizer is a fertilization company that has the goal of increasing the quality and longevity of our clients' lawns and gardens through the use of our flagship product, Lush Fertilizer.
What has led to the success of your company?
I attribute the success of my company to the people working in our research and development team, who after many years have finally started development on a chemical compound known as Drufo.
Is your only goal to improve the quality of lawns and products?
No. Our secondary goal is to spread awareness about our rapidly changing climate by donating 10% of our annual profits to nonprofit charities who have the goal of decreasing our nitrogen emissions, cleaning our oceans, and teaching the younger generations on how we can better help the environment.
Have you or Lush Fertilizer won any awards for your humanitarian work?
Why, yes. In fact, in 2019, we won the prestigious Seal Award, and I was personally nominated for the Champions of the Earth Award in 2020.
Congratulations. So, Mr. Doncourt, why are you here in court today?
Well, I'm here in court today because Ms. Weirs is making the allegations that our product, Lush Fertilizer, caused her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
You mentioned earlier that one of the chemicals in your product is Drufo. Could you please explain to us what Drufo is?
In simple terms, Drufo is a bonding agent that is put inside our fertilizer to help increase its shelf life.
Has Drufo been approved by state and federal governments in the United States?
Why, yes, it has. After a number of testings from the EPA, both federal and state guidelines have been followed, which means that Drufo is safe for the general public use. And this means that safety warnings aren't necessary for our product, yet we still use them out of an abundance of caution.
I'd like to switch gears now and ask you about a former employee named Carson Durst. Did you know Miss Durst when she worked at Lush?
Why, yes, I knew Miss Durst. In fact, she was a family friend, and regrettably, I pulled some strings to get her into the company, though she showed promise quickly rising through the ranks as an intern and eventually landed a full-time job with our research and development team. And after the training was done, she went on for a few years, but eventually started stagnating. After a number of poor performance reviews, I realized that she was no longer interested in working with our company and wasn't meeting the standards that I had set for her considering her pay grade. So we had to sadly fire her, though she immediately went to our biggest competitor, Terra's Greenery, which as of right now, we are filing a lawsuit against her for breaking our non-disclosure agreement.
Do you have a response to Ms. Durst's claim that Lush Fertilizer covered up data that Drufo was carcinogenic and possibly linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, that claim is completely false. Not once during her time with the company or at all was a link made between Drufo and cancer. If Ms. Durst had ever come across such information, she failed at her one job to inform anyone within the company.
Mr. Doncourt, you also mentioned that you use warning labels on your product. What warning labels was Lush Fertilizer required to put on their product?
As I said, due to the safety of Drufo and our products, we aren't required to use warning labels, yet we still use the standard warning labels for all fertilization companies, that being wearing long sleeves, pants, gloves, a respirator, and 95 mask, and to wash their hands and equipment after use.
Why didn't you say on the label that failing to wear protective gear would cause people to get sick or possibly develop cancer?
Because not once during the development of Drufo was a connection between Drufo and cancer ever made.
If any valid scientific studies or government agency had determined that Drufo was carcinogenic to humans, what would you have done?
We would have never used Drufo in our products. We're in the business of helping our clients, not hurting them.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, do you work for Lush Fertilizer?
I am the CEO, yes.
And is Drufo used in Lush Fertilizer?
It is.
You've currently been through a divorce, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. This is improper character evidence.
Response.
Could counsel elaborate further on how this is improper character evidence?
Yes, the divorce of Blake Doncourt holds no relation to the court case at hand.
Your Honor, if I may have a response.
You may.
I'm laying down the foundation for the financial incentive Mr. Doncourt has in this case and to show the jury his personal bias within his testimony.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
I would like to change my objection to prejudicial evidence. I anticipate that the opposing counsel will ask questions regarding the character of my witness, and I do not believe that it is more informative than it is prejudicial.
Regarding that objection, any response?
No, Your Honor.
The objection as to relevance or character evidence is sustained.
Okay, Your Honor, I will move on.
Okay.
Mr. Doncourt, sorry?
I just said thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Doncourt, baking would have been the best way to mitigate any risk of carcinogens in Drufo, correct?
That would assume there are risks to begin with, but as I said, Drufo is completely safe for use.
And yet you still didn't bake Drufo, correct?
Because it is safe for the general public, yes.
It's also because it was too expensive to bake it, correct?
We are a growing business. Needlessly throwing away money that doesn't need to be spent would hinder us.
And you believe that Drufo is not carcinogenic, correct?
Not once during its development was ever a connection made.
Which is exactly why you didn't believe it needed a warning on the label?
No, we use warning labels.
Mr. Doncourt, you claim that, warning labels concerning the carcinogenicity of the Drufo used in the product.
It is not carcinogenic, so we do not need warning labels saying it as such.
Right. And Mr. Doncourt, you claim that your research on Drufo safety was extensive, correct?
That is correct.
Meaning you went above and beyond to ensure that every finding of your research team was thoroughly investigated, correct?
That is correct. We did do research on Drufo.
So when Carson Durst published his findings in his notebook, you launched an in-house study to investigate, yes or no?
Yes.
And you launched this in-house study because you were concerned that there might be a risk of Drufo, correct?
Yes, if there was a potential risk, then.
And during the study, according to your lead product engineer, Carson Durst, one scientist expressed concern that Drufo was carcinogenic, correct?
Could you please refresh my memory?
This is something you should be able to attest to, considering you just testified that you were the one who launched the in-house study, Mr. Doncourt. I'll repeat the question if you need it.
Yes.
Okay. And during the study, according to your lead product engineer, Carson Durst, one scientist expressed concern that Drufo was carcinogenic, correct?
Yes, but it would have only been a concern.
And that it was also possibly linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, correct?
Possibly, but after the study, there was never a connection made afterwards.
And nowhere was non-Hodgkin lymphoma mentioned in this report, correct?
Because not a connection was made.
You just previously testified that it was possibly linked, Mr. Doncourt.
Yes, and then after the study was completed, it was determined that it was not carcinogenic. So in the report, we didn't say such.
So it was never truly investigated, was it?
I just testified that we had done the research, concluded that it wasn't carcinogenic, and then produced a study saying that it wasn't carcinogenic.
Mr. Doncourt, you just previously testified that there were possible links to the carcinogenicity, and you also answered yes to my question of if it was possibly linked to non-Hodgkin's.
This was before the study. You asked, before the study was concluded, that could there have been a possibility? I said yes, because there always could be. And then after the study, we determined that there wasn't a link. So the possibility
Mr. Doncourt, my question was after the study. I laid the foundation mentioning that you launched the in-house study first, correct? And then after that was your test, like you testifying, saying that it was possibly linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But I will just move on with this line of questioning. I'd like to turn your attention to Carson Durst now. Carson Durst was an employee under Lush, correct?
That is correct.
Do you have a copy of Exhibit 4 available to you?
Would you allow me to grab it? I don't have it currently in front of me.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. And Your Honor, do you have a copy of Exhibit 4 available to you as well?
Yes.
Let the record show that this is a clean and unmarked copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4. I request permission to show Exhibit 4 to Blake Doncourt.
You may.
Mr. Doncourt, once you have the piece of evidence available, could you please identify what it is?
It is a email.
Do you see your name at the top of the email there?
I do.
Okay. Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 4 into evidence at the time. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this document is hearsay. There is no proof that this email was in fact sent from Carson Durst. This could be manufactured. In addition, this document is confidential, so we object on the grounds that it is subject to Carson Durst's non-disclosure agreement and should not be allowed into evidence without due process.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
I'd like to bring instruction number 12 of the case to your attention, which states that evidence may be either direct or circumstantial. Circumstantial evidence is a proof of the fact or circumstances from which the existence or non-existence of other facts may reasonably be inferred. All other evidence is direct evidence. The law makes no distinction between the effect of direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. And so today, this piece of evidence is circumstantial and may be used in court today.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
This evidence is not circumstantial because it was not from the circumstances being stated. This evidence is just a document that was provided. We have no knowledge of where it came from.
All right, so the document is hearsay. However, for purposes of this competition, Exhibit 4 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Doncourt, is this email from the product manager of Drufo?
That's what it says at the top, yes.
Do you see your name at the recipient list at the top?
I do.
And do you see Carson Durst's name as well?
I do.
Does this email state that there are potential carcinogenic qualities identified in Drufo samples produced?
That's what it says. But
and did Lush Fertilizer ever put a warning on their product about the potential harm of cancer?
No.
And you said that if any valid scientific studies had indicated that there were any risks using Lush, you would have put warning labels on the packaging immediately, correct?
We wouldn't have used Drufo, but then again, I've never once seen this document before. This had never been appeared. No evidence was brought before me.
However, Mr. Doncourt, you did previously testify that concerns had arisen within scientific studies and the in-house study that you yourself had launched concerning the carcinogenicity of Drufo. So it was made, you did know about the potential harms of Drufo, yet you still failed to put a warning concerning these qualities on the label, correct?
Could you please re-ask the question?
So knowing the carcinogenic qualities in Drufo, like you had previously mentioned in your testimony that you did know about, and the dangers it posed, you still failed to put a warning concerning these qualities on the label, correct?
Well, we didn't use warning labels because after all was said and done and it had been fully put into the market, it was determined safe.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, you were asked a number of questions about baking fertilizer and the properties that could be removed if you did bake your fertilizer. So clarify for us, what would be the advantages of baking this fertilizer?
There would be no advantages of baking Lush fertilizer as it has been determined to be safe.
And with the profits that are saved from baking fertilizer, what does the company do with that extra profit?
Our extra profit goes towards nonprofit charities and is put back into the company to help us grow.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. May this witness step down. Defense wish to call their next witness.
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Skylar Weirs to the stand.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Ms. Weirs. Please state your name for the jury.
Skylar Weirs, W-E-I-R-S.
What is your current occupation, Ms. Weirs?
Currently, I'm a freelance investigative journalist for a magazine called The Rationalist.
What is The Rationalist?
The Rationalist is a science advocacy and education magazine published by the Rationalist Society.
Could you give me some more insight on what the Rationalist Society does?
It's a nonprofit organization devoted to resisting the spread of pseudoscience and promoting scientific skepticism in certain fields.
As a freelance journalist, how are the topics you write about chosen?
It could go one of two ways. Either an editor can come to me with a series of topics to write about, or I can go to them with ideas of my own. But at the end of the day, they decide what gets published and what doesn't.
Ms. Weirs, how do your personal beliefs about a topic influence your research or writing?
They don't at all. I believe it's my job as a professional journalist to completely remove my opinion and give the public a research that is fair and balanced.
Ms. Weirs, do you specialize in any particular topics when writing for the Rationalist?
Well, I write about a variety of topics, but I most frequently write about commercial agriculture and modern agritech.
What research have you done in agricultural technology in particular?
Some time ago, my editor came to me with a series of topics to research, like genetically modified crops, modern agritech companies, specifically, modern agritech and specifically modern agritech companies. And that's kind of how I got introduced to DRUFO. So for the majority of the year, I spent all my time researching and studying these topics. I would start by reading various publications issued by modern agritech companies, and then I would track down and read each of the studies cited in those publications to make sure I overturned every last stone. But a majority of my information comes from the USDA and NADSTA.
This is time the defense moves to admit Skylar Weirs is an expert in the field of agritech. And Your Honor actually weighed in on the subject in a pretrial ruling of limine. And if I may read from the document found on page 4 of the case study.
Okay.
By offer of proof, the defendant asserts it can show that Skylar Weirs spent considerable time researching agritech companies by reviewing publications written by those companies, research studies referenced in those publications, and information maintained by the USDA and NASDA. If such facts are confirmed at trial, they are sufficient to establish the witness has specialized knowledge beyond that held by the average juror, and the witness will be allowed to provide testimony under Rule 702 regarding agritech. Your Honor, the defense believes that Ms. Weirs has established all these key components of Rule 702 and should therefore be allowed expert testimony in the field of agritech.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, brief voir dire, if I may.
You may.
Ms. Weirs, you have never conducted a study of your own, correct?
No, I have not.
And you have no experience working in the agritech industry?
No, I'm a journalist.
Okay, and you've been writing about the agritech industry for less than a year?
That is correct.
And you research your writing with information and data you find from other scientific experts that have published it, correct?
That's correct.
And agritech is a scientific field, correct?
It is, yes.
And you have no experience in the scientific field?
Nothing other than my extensive research, no.
Only in researching data that's been published by scientists. I'm sorry, in reading and reporting on data that's been published by scientists.
Yes.
And you report based on how you see fit, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So you are reporting your opinion on these because you have no expertise, correct?
Like I said earlier, I do not involve my opinion.
But you have no formal expertise in interpreting or validating scientific data, correct?
No, I do not.
Because you have no experience in the scientific field, correct?
I do not have experience in the scientific field.
So you are publishing your layman's perspective, your layman's interpretation of expert reports, correct?
That is correct.
And you are doing this without any expertise in how to go about reporting these, correct? Scientifically speaking?
Scientifically speaking, no.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, at this time, I object to the defense's tendering of Skylar Weirs as an expert in agritech, since it has been stated in this voir dire that agritech is a scientific field, and due to her lack of expert knowledge or any experience in the field specifically to scientific data that she published in her writings, while she may be able to attest to the conduct of the agritech industry itself, she lacks the scientific expertise to testify to any scientific conclusions or inferences. So I ask that it be clarified that she is an expert in agritech industry and conduct, but not in any of the scientific aspects of the field.
Response?
Your Honor, we have proved that Skylar Weirs has spent considerable time researching these agritech companies and maintaining information by the USDA and NASDA. These are government agencies. Also, she has worked for a Rationalist magazine. This magazine is a scientific magazine. Obviously, she has research and experience in the scientific field.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
This witness just testified that she has actually no experience in the scientific field. And so while I understand that she may be able to testify as to what she was reporting, she cannot testify or make any actual scientific inferences, validating or giving any, scrutinizing any of the scientific data that she read. Rather, she can only testify as to what she read and what she reported, because that is her expertise, not in any science.
All right. Anything else?
No, Your Honor. I stand by my statement.
Okay. For the purposes of this competition, she's so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, is there anything unique about Lush Fertilizer?
Lush Fertilizer uses a truly revolutionary chemical called Drufo.
And what's unique about Drufo?
Well, Drufo has several benefits, one of them being that it's an effective pesticide, and another one being that it's an effective bonding agent, meaning it bonds to both Lush Fertilizer's active ingredients and to the grass and prevents it from being washed away as quickly.
You first said that Drufo was an effective pesticide. How does this benefit consumers?
It's beneficial because there's no need for Lush Fertilizer to add any additional pesticides often found in other fertilizers, like glyphosate and arsenic, which are categorized as carcinogens.
Why is it beneficial that we limit our exposure to glyphosate and arsenic?
Well, since they're carcinogens, if exposed to it, some may develop cancer in certain cases.
The second point you brought up about Drufo was that it was an effective bonding agent. How does this benefit consumers?
Its ability to stick to the grass and Lush Fertilizer's active ingredients means that significantly less fertilizer needs to be applied and less often. So while other fertilizers need to be applied ballpark 5 to 6 times a year, Lush Fertilizer only needs to be applied 1 to 2 times a year for the same results, which ultimately leads to less nitrogen exposure to both its user and to the environment.
So here's why is it important that we limit nitrogen exposure?
Nitrogen in some forms can be considered as a carcinogen. So in its carcinogenic form, nitrogen has been known to contribute to various types of cancer, hemoglobinemia, adverse reproductive outcomes, especially neural tube defects, diabetes, thyroid conditions. I could go on and on, but I would not want to waste your time.
Ms. Weirs, based on your knowledge and experience in the field of agritech, have you concluded whether there is a causal link between Drufo and cancer?
In the year that I spent researching and studying Drufo, I did not find a single study that established a causal link between Drufo and cancer, no. Instead, I only found the evidence that Drufo protects its consumers from overexposure to nitrogen and exposure to dangerous pesticides.
Weirs, if Drufo has not been classified as a carcinogen, why are there campaigns claiming that it is?
Lush Fertilizer threatens to upend the old guard of agritech. And the old guard specifically refers to, in this case, companies who have been in the agricultural field for such a long time and who don't want to promote change. So this old guard is spending billions of dollars to destroy Lush Fertilizer's reputation because at the end of the day, they know that their product is much more effective than theirs.
And how do Lush Fertilizer products compare to other products on the market?
All of my research suggests that Lush Fertilizer is the safest product out there in terms of fertilizers. In my personal opinion, I believe it's more than likely that Dakota was exposed to fertilizers, other fertilizers that she used during her time as a landscaping technician that have been proven to contain carcinogens.
Do you know the plaintiff in this case, Dakota Weirs?
Yes, I do. Dakota is my twin sister.
And what is the status of your relationship with your twin sister?
We haven't always been the closest. That could be due to us just having different interests or life just leading us down different paths. But at the end of the day, she's family and I'll always love her.
Ms. Weirs, is your testimony in any way influenced by your relationship with your twin sister?
Absolutely not. I stand by my research and I just want everyone to know the truth about Drufo.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, you consider yourself an advocate of the environment, correct?
I do, yes.
And you feel like that products like Drufo need to be on the market, correct?
I do, very sure.
And thank you. And as we've seen throughout your investigation into the issue, you are willing to go the lengths to defend Drufo so it may stay on the market, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
You are willing to go to lengths to defend Drufo so it may stay on the market from an environmental perspective, correct?
Yes, I am.
Because your concern is environmental benefit.
It is, yes.
And you stated that you came into this investigation with that as your main concern, correct?
Yes.
Because the amazing cause of environmentalism is your reason for being here today, correct?
That is correct.
And you even stated that Drufo is a mission you believe in, correct?
Yes, it is.
And this mission, environmentalism, would be supported through the success of Lush Fertilizer's product today, correct?
Correct.
So you are biased towards Lush Fertilizer's success today, correct?
I'm here today because I believe in my research and I have found that there is not a link between Drufo and cancer, yes.
So you don't believe that supporting something because of a personal motive, which is environmentalism, as you previously stated, is bias?
I don't believe it's a personal motive. I believe it's factual information that Drufo, it's not a link between cancer. That is why I'm here.
But you personally testified that your personal main concern was environmentalism, correct?
Correct.
And you just testified that if Lush was to succeed today, that it would benefit your personal concern, which is environmentalism, correct?
Correct.
So you are biased towards Lush Fertilizer's success today, correct?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Weirs, you were asked a number of questions today about your bias in this case.
Yes.
In any way, are you being paid by your testimony today by Lush Fertilizer?
No, I'm not. I do not have a financial motive in my testimony.
Have you ever been compensated ever by Lush Fertilizer? No further questions, Your Honor.
May this witness step down? Does defense wish to present their next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Okay. Go ahead.
1 moment, the witness, oh, here he is. Thank you. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Dr. Williams. Could you please state your name, spelling your last for the record?
Yes, my name is Dr. Devin Williams, spelled W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S.
How are you employed, Dr. Williams?
I'm currently employed as the head toxicologist of the R&D department of Lush Fertilizers.
Can you explain to the jury what toxicology is?
Toxicology is the study of chemicals and how they enter the body and interfere with systems.
At this time, I would like for opposing counsel, the witness, and Your Honor to please refer to Exhibit 9.
Okay.
Dr. Williams, do you recognize this document?
Yes, this is a copy of my CV.
Is Exhibit 9 a fair and accurate representation of your education, certifications, and professional experience?
Yes, it is.
At this time, I would like to admit Exhibit 9 as I would like to admit Exhibit 9 into evidence and constructively publish it to the jury.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, Exhibit 9 is admitted.
I would like to, Dr. Williams, I would like to briefly walk through your CV with the jury. If the jury could please follow along on their copies of Exhibit 9. Starting from the top of your CV, can you please describe your educational background?
Yes, I got my bachelor's in toxicology from the University of Utah. And then I went on to get my master's and my PhD from Colorado State University.
You mentioned that you currently work as the Director of Toxicology Research and Development at Lush Fertilizer. How long have you held that position?
About 10 years now.
What are the responsibilities associated with that position?
As the head toxicologist of the R&D department, I am in charge of helping to construct procedure for our experiments and studies, and in order to oversee the processes to make sure that proper scientific procedure is being drawn or is being used and that proper conclusions can be drawn from them.
I see here that you also hold a position at both University of New Mexico and at Colorado State University. Can you tell us about those positions?
Yes, at the University of New Mexico, I'm an assistant professor of forensic toxicology, and at CSU, I am a visiting professor of toxicology, or visiting associate professor of toxicology, excuse me.
Are any of the courses that you currently teach relevant to your testimony today?
Yes, TOX, T13, or environmental and occupational chemicals. The environmental and occupational question, the environmental and occupational chemicals in question are fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides that farmers or other people may experience.
Excluding your position at Lush Fertilizer and your positions at the two universities you teach at, could you please briefly summarize your occupational history for us?
Yes, I was a chief medical examiner toxicologist, briefly.
Moving to the second page of your CV, what types of certifications do you currently hold?
I have certifications in clinical and forensic toxicology, as well as a certification as a bioanalytical laboratory director.
Could you please explain the difference between clinical and forensic toxicology?
Clinical toxicology is when you have a person and you analyze the chemicals and substances within their system in order to determine whether or not they're the cause of any symptoms they may be experiencing, and then how to neutralize them. Whereas forensic toxicology, you have a person who has passed away and you examine the chemicals and substances within their body in order to determine if those chemicals played a role in their death.
Have you published any peer-reviewed articles in your field?
Yes, several.
Your Honor, at this time, we would offer Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in clinical and forensic toxicology.
Any objection?
Brief one, Your Honor.
You may.
So, Dr. Williams, looking at your curriculum vitae, I noticed that it only mentions environmental and occupational toxicology once within the entire curriculum vitae. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Whereas it mentions pharmaceutical and forensic in all essentially other aspects of it. Could you please explain to me how pharmaceutical, as in drugs, and forensic, as in postmortem autopsy, relate to this case today?
Well, certainly. To become a forensic toxicologist, you do need medical certifications. And so I have experience with medical toxicology. And as I previously stated, a certification in clinical toxicology. So although that is not the degree I have relevant experience in the field.
Yes, but your main specialty is in forensics and pharmaceutical, correct?
My main specialty in my education was, yeah, but for the past 10 years, I have been a toxicologist with Lush Fertilizer.
Do you have your curriculum vitae directly in front of you currently, Dr. Devin Williams?
Yes, I do.
Perfect. May you go to the Larimer County Office of Chief Medical Examiner's Toxicology part of the bottom of the first page, and please read from performed to insults.
Performed the methods of forensic toxicological analysis of human samples collected at autopsy used to determine the role of drugs and other toxic chemicals in establishing the cause of death. For medical legal investigation, analyze the results of chemical analyses to identify potential toxic insults.
And would you say this is the extent of forensic toxicology?
Yes, more or less.
So now that we have established that it was autopsies and human samples as postmortem as the sense of forensic toxicology, and we can see that it is mentioned 7 times within your curriculum vitae versus the 1 time of environmental and occupational, I move to only submit this witness as an expert in the fields of forensic and pharmaceutical toxicology rather than clinical as well.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor, several responses. The first being that this witness currently holds certifications in both clinical toxicology in the state of Colorado, as well as a bioanalytical laboratory director certification in the state of New Mexico, which would indicate his ability to testify in a clinical capacity. Additionally, The specific field of forensic toxicology does mean that this witness has had, I believe that if anything, it makes him more qualified to testify on this topic because he is used to testifying in the capacity of what the effects are on the human body, which is at the heart of this case, the issue at hand. So I believe that his experience as a forensic scientist is not, as the plaintiff would argue, a detriment, but rather a means to enhance his testimony today.
All right, Dr. Devin Williams is certified as an expert in clinical and forensic toxicology.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, what is DRUFO?
DRUFO is the chemical bonding agent that we use within lush fertilizers in order to remove free nitrogen from the environment.
Do you work with lush fertilizer products containing DRUFO?
Yes, I do.
For how long have you worked with these products?
About 10 years, my whole time at Lush Fertilizers.
Have you written any studies concerning DRUFO?
I personally have not written any studies pertaining to DRUFO. However, as the head of the R&D department or as the head toxicologist of the R&D department of Lush Fertilizers, I am incredibly familiar with every study that comes out of it as I help, say, construct procedure or secure grants for said studies.
So it's safe to say that you're knowledgeable about DRUFO.
Yes.
Have you reached any conclusions regarding whether DRUFO causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Yes, I have.
What did you rely on to reach these conclusions?
I relied on my education as well as experience and the studies that we have produced and replicated within the company at Lush Fertilizers.
What conclusions have you reached?
DRUFO does not cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Is there any type of statistical link between DRUFO and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
There is no statistically significant link between DRUFO use and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And in fact, we actually see a weaker correlation between DRUFO use and the development of cancer than we do with many other fertilizers that are on the market.
Why is that the case? The DRUFO is actually less cancer causing.
DRUFO is less cancer causing because of the way that the molecule works. It bonds to excess nitrogen in the environment, and that nitrogen, when bonded to
Objection
DRUFO,
outside the scope of the witness. This witness is not in chemical toxicology, only clinical.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. Toxicology inherently from its definition is the study of how chemicals interact with the body. So saying chemical toxicology is redundant. Because he's a clinical toxicologist, that means that he works in a medical field, and it inherently means that he works with chemicals on a daily basis.
The objection's overruled.
Dr. Williams, could you please continue with your answer, starting on how DRUFO holds on to excess nitrogen?
yes, the DRUFO will bond and hold on to that excess nitrogen. And when the nitrogen is bonded to the DRUFO molecule, it is unable to interact with the environment around it. So it cannot enter the body and act as a carcinogen or enter the free environment and cause an algal bloom.
If there's no evidence that DRUFO is harmful to humans, why is it banned in the EU?
The European Union has a sort of blanket rule where any substance that contains nitrogen is banned on grounds that it's carcinogenic. We are actually currently constructing an appeal to the European Union, citing the functionality of the DRUFO molecule and how it works to say that it is not, in fact, carcinogenic. So,
moving on to the testimony here today in court, were you in the courtroom when Dr. Casey Rogers testified?
yes, I was.
Have you reached any conclusions regarding the research that Rogers testified on?
Yes, Dr. Rogers' research is misled at best and misinformation at worst.
Why do you find her research to be unreliable?
For the two main reasons: that her study was not peer-reviewed within the scientific community. Not having a study peer-reviewed is really the biggest red flag it can have. It really damages a paper's credibility. And the second is that improper procedure was used. There was an experimental group who was exposed to Drufo, and they did develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. However, they were also exposed to a myriad of other chemicals that were not factored for or accounted for in any way. So it's impossible to say that the Drufo is what caused their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when all of them were exposed to an entire laundry list of other chemicals that could be the culprit.
Are you being paid for your testimony here today, Dr. Williams?
I am not, no.
Will your salary change based on your testimony today?
No, my salary will not be raised or cut based on how this case is decided.
And to clarify your testimony, did Drufo cause Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, it did not.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Dr. Williams. I would just like to ask you a few more questions to broaden the jury's understanding of this case. So you previously mentioned that Drufo is banned in the European Union, correct?
Yes.
And this is based on the nitrogen content.
That is correct.
Now you say when they test it in a lab, they find nitrogen in the sample, correct? But it's has different behaviors in real world conditions. Is that correct?
Well, not necessarily. The nitrogen in the sample comes from the inherent behavior of the Drufo molecule. That nitrogen that is detected is there, but it is not able to interact with the human body and cause cancers.
So are you saying that in-lab conditions are different than the real-world conditions that the EU is the in-lab conditions that the EU is observing are different than the real-world conditions that Drufo actually does in a real-world environment?
No, I'm saying that even though there is nitrogen within the Drufo, the way that it is interacting with the molecule, it is unable to act as a carcinogen.
So you are saying that you do not believe that the nitrogen found in the lab is different than real world conditions? I'm sorry, I'll rephrase the question. I understand that was confusing. Are you testifying that the conditions found in the EU for the nitrogen content in their lab that you not have previously stated in your witness statement that they are different in real world conditions?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that one more time?
Yes, of course. Are you saying that the in-lab conditions of nitrogen that the EU has studied to come to the conclusion that Drufo should be banned is different than the conditions that you would find in nature with Drufo actually being applied?
Oh, well, yes, that is the definition of lab conditions, is that many other factors aren't accounted for. So, yes.
Thank you. And with that being said, did you conduct any out-of-house real-world studies on the effects of Drufo on the human body?
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is being asked to testify on the behavior of other third parties, not his own, not the laboratories of his own company for which he is representing here today.
I'm sorry, I think that you misunderstood the question. I'm asking if Lush Corporations and Devin Williams, as head of research, have conducted any out-of-house studies.
Your Honor, respectfully, out-of-house means not conducted by the corporation, so the witness would reasonably have no knowledge of that.
Your Honor, out-of-house means not conducted within corporation labs.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
The objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. So did you conduct any real-world studies on the effects of Drufo on the human body?
Only within Lush fertilizers.
So with that, yes or no, did you conduct any real-world condition studies of the effects of Drufo on the human body?
We have conducted in-house studies, so yes.
In-house, as in lab?
Yes.
Thank you. And now may you please remind me of your position within the company?
I am the head toxicologist of the research and development department.
And then, are you also a board member within the company?
Yes.
So do you have some financial stake within the company's success?
Only in the sense that they pay my salary. As I said previously, my salary will not be raised or cut depending on how this case is decided.
But would the success of Lush Corporations affect you personally, Dr. Devin Williams?
Well, yes, it would. If the company goes under, I would be out of a job.
And would this case affect Lush Corporations as a whole?
It would as a whole, but it's I'm not familiar enough with the financials of the company to say if it would be devastating or not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, it's true that your position, your higher up position within Lush is, my apologies. Are you the director, are you the chair of the ethics committee at Lush?
Yes.
What does your position look like there?
I make sure that we follow ethical practices and ethical practices within scientific procedure so that we are able to determine that what we do is the most safe and accurate that it can be.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
May this witness step down. Okay.
Does the defense
have any? Go ahead.
Oh, my apologies, Your Honor. The defense rests.
Okay. Thank you. Does the plaintiff wish to present a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. Just 1 second to rename.
Your Honor, if I may clarify with my timekeeper about how much time I have for my closing argument. In today's trial, the jury had 4 instructions for the plaintiff that they had to prove with a preponderance of evidence. First of all, they had to prove that the defendant manufactured a fertilizer product containing a chemical compound known as Drufo. That has gone completely undisputed in the case today. We know for a fact that Lush Fertilizer contained Drufo within their fertilizers and distributed to their consumers. Second of all, the plaintiff had to prove that the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating an unreasonable risk of harm to persons who might reasonably be expected to use the product in the manner the defendant might have reasonably expected. This is the most crucial instruction in today's case. First of all, the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care because, as we have seen through 2 different testimonies, Blake Duncourt not only read an email debriefing them on a possible risk about the carcinogenic properties of Lush, he also admitted in his cross that scientific data came from his own research team and that he was aware of this data that said that it might be carcinogenic. Then, in their report, they somehow published that there was no risks. Are we seeing the contradictions here? Are we seeing the risks taken here? What happened is that the CEO of this company was perfectly cognizant that there may be a risk. Regardless of whether there was a risk, they did not adequately put this into their warning label because we have seen today that there was nothing within the warning label that said anything about carcinogenicity. With that, the warning label was obscure, had a typo, and did not necessitate any reason to be wearing this protective equipment. If it had said that it was carcinogenic or that there were such risks, then Dakota Wares would have had the reasonable means, and would have reasonably been expected to have done that. But they weren't, because they were not provided the grounds and the means to do that. We have seen overwhelmingly that this is satisfied by a preponderance of both testimonial and documented evidence, because at the end of the day, Lush Fertilizer did not take the steps to mitigate this risk, regardless of whether or not it caused Dakota's condition is not important to this specific instruction. Instead, we understand that regardless of that, of the cancer, Lush Fertilizer took a risk today, and they're paying the consequences for that. So 2 is satisfied by an overwhelming preponderance of evidence. Third, the plaintiff was one of those persons the defendant should have reasonably expected to use the product. Once again, of course, Lush Fertilizer was distributed to its consumers. Lush fertilizer was used by Dakota Wares, and that has been nowhere disputed in today's case. So that's not only satisfied by both evidence, testimonial, and documented, but it's satisfied intuitively because no one has gone against it, and it has been continuously substantiated in today's case that Dakota Wares used a product that contained Drufo and that it was distributed to her by Lush Fertilizer. So they are culpable for distributing it to her. Finally, the fourth instruction is that the plaintiff had damages that were caused by the defendant's negligence, while the product was being used in a manner that the defendant should have reasonably expected. Once again, relating back to the warning label, it did not necessitate a reason. It did not inform of a risk that would necessitate Dakota Wares to wear the protective equipment. And if it had adequately have done that, what would happen is that Lush Fertilizer would have provided a warning label that had delineated this, that had said that it could cause cancer, that in that state or in America, there has been research from their own company stating that it does have carcinogenic properties. Regardless of whether or not they knew it would cause cancer, their research team showed that. They didn't do that. What they also could have done to mitigate their own risk and to negate their liability in this case is bake the product. That was what they proposed after all as a way to mitigate this risk, and they still didn't do that. They didn't do it because it was too expensive. In the end of the day, at the very end of the day, Lush Fertilizer is valuing their money over human lives. They took the risk. They did not even negate their liability by the very method that they proposed that was scientifically uncorroborated. They didn't take those steps. They didn't provide any warnings, and what they did provide was obscure and did not give Dakota Wares any reasonable prompt to wear protective equipment. And at the end of the day, we can see that Lush Fertilizer, by a preponderance of evidence, has not negated their liability and that they are culpable for Dakota Wares' condition. Because, as we have seen through numerous pieces of evidence, it does cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Lush Fertilizer was aware of that. They took the risk, did not negate it, and now we have an innocent person who is suffering from cancer and can no longer do what they love. We please see that you vote. Since we have satisfied all of these four instructions with the preponderance evidence, we see that you vote for the plaintiff today. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the defendant wish to present a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense does have a closing argument. May I proceed?
You may.
Dakota Wares played a game of Russian roulette. She took a risk with her life, her career, her passion. Dakota Wares risked it all. For what? The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is that Lush Fertilizer is safer and more environmentally friendly than any of its competitors. The truth is that Dakota Wares was not negligent, or the truth is that Lush Fertilizer was not negligent in its production of Drufo. And the truth is that the plaintiff gambled with her life when she ignored countless warnings to wear protective clothing and face coverings while working as a landscape technician. When the plaintiff got sick from one of the many chemicals she was exposed to, she reached for the easiest company to sue, my client, Lush Fertilizer. Members of the jury, you have before you a set of jury instructions that serves to guide your decisions during deliberation. I'd like you to direct your attention to instruction number 2. This instruction states that for the plaintiff to prevail on her negligence claim, she must prove 4 elements by a preponderance of the evidence. This simply means that she must prove all 4 elements are more likely true than not. The plaintiff has failed to meet this burden for 2 reasons. First, the plaintiff has not shown that Lush Fertilizer caused her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Every witness in this case has testified that competing fertilizers contain known carcinogens. The plaintiff herself acknowledges that during her 4 years working as a landscape technician, she used multiple different chemicals, multiple different fertilizers, in addition to Lush's. Given this, it is impossible to know which, if any, of these chemicals caused her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The plaintiff has provided no evidence to suggest that it was Drufo in particular, rather than any of those other fertilizers that caused her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. For this reason, the plaintiff has failed to prove the causation element of her claim, and you can find Lush Fertilizer not liable on that basis alone. Second, even if the plaintiff had shown that it was Drufo and not any of the other products she was exposed to that caused her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, her claim would still fail because she has not shown that Lush Fertilizer was negligent in his production of Drufo. You heard from 3 witnesses from the defense, and each one of them told you the same thing. there is not and never has been any valid scientific evidence to suggest that Drufo is carcinogenic. To start, you heard from Blake Doncourt, CEO of Lush Fertilizer. He talked to you about the extensive testing his company's products undergo before entering the market. He also testified that if he had seen any valid scientific evidence that Drufo was carcinogenic, he would have immediately pulled it from the market. Then you heard from Skylar Weirs, an independent journalist with the Rationalist magazine. She was not paid by Lush Fertilizer to be here, and she has never been paid by Lush Fertilizer. She studied and wrote extensively on Lush Fertilizer and Drufo and found no correlation between it and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Finally, you heard from Dr. Devin Williams, who holds a PhD in pharmacology and toxicology and has led Lush Fertilizer's research and development team for the past 7 years. Dr. Williams and his team have proven that not only is Drufo non-carcinogenic, it also significantly reduces environmental risk. In fact, the only witnesses who ever suggested that Drufo is carcinogenic have a clear bias to testify against my client in this case. The plaintiff's paid expert, Dr. Casey Rogers, testified that she stands to rack up significant bills testifying in Drufo cases nationwide. However, the research she presents today rests on a shaky foundation. Her research hasn't even been peer-reviewed, much less repeated, and certainly not accepted as the truth by the scientific community. As for Carson Durst, she walked into this courtroom looking for something far more sinister. Ms. Durst has been looking for a way to get back at Blake Doncourt ever since she was fired from Lush Fertilizer. Ms. Durst claims to have been privy to a cover-up, but provides no evidence to support this conclusion. Most importantly, she admits that neither she nor Lush Fertilizer ever found any evidence tying Drufo to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in humans. As a result, the plaintiff has not met her burden of showing that Lush Fertilizer failed to exercise reasonable care. Ladies and gentlemen, even if you believe that the plaintiff has met her burden, you must also consider whether the plaintiff bears any responsibility for her own injuries. Instruction number 9 requires you to reduce the plaintiff's damages by whatever responsibility she bears for her injuries, up to 100%. How do we know that the plaintiff bears responsibility? We can point to Exhibit 1. The Lush Fertilizer label reads, as with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 face mask is recommended. The plaintiff herself told you that she did not use Lush Fertilizer as intended. She used it without goggles, without a mask, and without long sleeves and pants. She directly disobeyed the warnings by both her employer and the guidelines provided by the manufacturer. Given this, the defense requests that you find Lush Fertilizer not liable for negligence, or alternatively, find the plaintiff comparatively at fault for her injuries. Do not reward Ms. Weirs for her game of Russian roulette. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttal closed from the plaintiffs?
If I may ask my timekeeper how much time I have remaining. No rebuttal, Your Honor.
Did you say no rebuttal? I'm sorry.
Yes, Your Honor. All time has been used, so no rebuttal.
Okay. Well, great job. You guys all did a really great job.
All right, so scoring panelists, if you guys can get your scores submitted and then send me a note in the chat when you've submitted your scores. And as soon as that happens, we'll be able to give the participants some feedback and let them know what notes you guys have for them today.
And you want me to wait too, right? I was confused this morning. You don't want me to say anything while everybody's scoring.
I think folks have done it both ways in the past. I think it's probably better for us all just to submit our scores and do it that way.
Yeah, let's wait. All right, so we'll just wait a few minutes and then we'll find out when all the scores have been submitted.
If I can talk really quick, it was so much fun to go against you guys. It's always so interesting to see how the other teams argue their case. Like our plaintiff side looks completely different than yours. All three of our witnesses are guys and you guys are girls. So I tripped up a couple times on that, but it was so fun to go against you. You guys were really good competition.
Yeah, you guys gave us a great challenge. Thank you.
You guys did great.
My opposing counsel's over here. They're all excited too, but you can't see them. Oh wait, no, you can't see them. Never mind. They're excited. But thank you guys for being good competition. And thank you, judges. Thank you to judge and thank you, scoring panelists. There we go. They're the juries most of the time. Thank you guys for being here to help us out.
Thank you guys for being a part of this competition. It's really fun to watch.
Our scorekeepers extraordinaire have all submitted their scores, so we're ready to go with some comments. Judge Slade, if you want to get started.
Okay, I'll start. Sure. First of all, you all really worked hard. I can tell that you were very, very prepared. This is difficult. This is a difficult competition anyway. It's really difficult to do virtually. I think that there's some benefits to doing it virtually. You don't have to worry about what the rest of your body is doing, but walking around and doing all those things. But the other hard part about doing it virtually is sometimes the sound cuts in and out. That can stop your routine. That happened a couple of times and you guys just kept up with it. So really, really good job to everybody involved. I can tell everybody some just general ideas. Think about slowing down, because being virtual, two things. You're going to have to slow down in court. I promise you that if you don't slow down in court, when you're actually an attorney or a witness, a reporter will interrupt you and tell you that they can't keep up with what you're saying, especially closings. And I think that was because you guys were running out of time, but you started really up in the word count per second, right? And you can't do that. You've got to be able to get your arguments in. So everybody needs to slow down. And I would say enunciation is really important when you are virtual. So keep that in mind. Objections, generally, those were really good objections. This problem is, all mock trial problems are a little bit unrealistic, but some of these objections that I sustained, you guys could overcome, and that was for both teams. You can overcome them. Just because I sustained an objection, a couple of times I gave you some kind of hints. So listen to those hints in this competition, because other judges will do the same thing. You can ask some more foundational questions if you want to. You can lay some of the hearsay objections they were hearsay, but there might have been an exception, for example, that you could have laid a foundation for. So listen to the judges when they give you those hints. I think it's just a general rule for lawyers. You don't end on a sustained objection. That happened a couple of times. And really the sustained objection was, there was more information either that you could have gotten from the witness, or another question that could be a little, not necessarily in the same line of questioning, but still ask another question that either won't draw the objection or get some more information out. I have some notes on the specific objections, but I'm not sure if that's helpful or not. So I'm going to move on to the scoring folks and see. Oh, one last thing I wanted to point out. This competition and real life, don't argue with each other and don't argue with your witnesses. Where that kind of comes across is mostly during objections, but if a witness doesn't answer the question the same way that you think that witness should answer, or if you think it's somewhere else, point out where that witness is incorrect, but don't say things like, that's not what you said, or that's not the truth, or you don't know. Those kinds of things, and especially with each other during objections, be real careful, both in this competition and also in real life. That's not something that's allowed in most courtrooms, that kind of back and forth. So just keep those things in mind. But overall, I was really impressed with all of you. All the witnesses were very prepared and did a really great job. And so did all of the attorneys. So you guys should be very proud of yourselves.
Ms. Miller, it looks like you're next in line on my screen, so why don't you give your feedback?
Okay, sure. First of all, great job, everybody. Judge Slade, I echo all of your comments. I thought everyone was extraordinarily well prepared, especially witnesses. Congratulations. That is a lot of information. That's a lot of facts to master. And for you to just be able to pop off those answers as quickly as you did was really impressive. I've attended law school mock trials where the witnesses were not as prepared as you all were. So great job there. I echo all of Judge Slade's comments. The one, especially the back and forth on the objections, that's definitely not going to be allowed in real life. You'll want to state your objection, wait for the judge to give you a chance to respond or support your reasoning. But the back and forth was something that I noticed. But the only other thing I would comment on is on cross-examination. Try to keep a better control of your witness, right? You want to try to ask yes or no questions, things you already know the answers to. Don't let the witness kind of ramble and give that narrative. Cross-examination is one of my favorite things to do for that reason, because the lawyer talks the most, right? Like we're the ones that want to talk the most. And that's just the one piece of feedback I would have for those of you doing cross. But great job, everybody. This was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Martinez, would you like to give your feedback?
Yes. So witnesses, I think you all did a great job, and you had a really good grasp on the facts and kind of kept your cool in the line of fire, if you will. So great job for your witnesses. Just generally, I think everybody's demeanor on cross was great, right? I didn't feel offended for any of the witnesses by the way that cross was being presented. I think you kept it very respectful and focused on the facts versus attacking the witnesses on cross. So good job there. A little bit of individual feedback. I thought Evelyn Clark, I thought you handled objections really well and were very articulate in how you managed them. I also thought you had great transitions in your line of questioning. Miss Gouda, your cross was great. I also thought that your line of questioning in your cross was very methodical and brought out a lot of great information. Emma Eastland, your objections I thought were fantastic, as far as you drawing attention to things that maybe were inappropriate or that had some questionable uses there. And then Braden, Owen, and Aiden, I thought you all did fantastic as far as handling your experts and the voir dire portion of that. And I was very impressed, Aiden, that you were able to get your witness to admit bias on the stand. So great job with that. But overall, I think you guys did a really good job. Everybody's demeanor was fantastic as far as handling witnesses, dealing with cross-examination, your counsels, those sorts of things. So really good job, guys.
All right, Mr. Pratt, how about your feedback? Oh, Chris, we need you to
sorry.
unmute.
Yeah, sorry. I did it. I was going to say that one of the best parts about going last is everyone said a lot of the things I was going to cover. So I don't have to talk much, but I do want to say, although the preparation was fantastic, both teams were very well prepared. There was one or two times where you could tell people got a little too wrapped into their preparation and they didn't react to what people had already said, or they weren't able to think as well on the fly. Often when you prepare, you're preparing so that you can think on the fly in those instances. And I thought, for the most part, fantastic. A lot of the objections and the responses to those objections, people were doing a great job thinking. Just something to think about. Don't get too wrapped up in what you've prepared and what questions you want to ask. React to what the witness is saying and what opposing counsel is saying. But overall, yeah, it was fun to watch. I had some of my kids were here watching you and they had a great time.
All right, guys, with that, having concluded the feedback, good luck this afternoon. We've got one more round to go. Judge Slade, thank you for being here this morning. And scoring panelists, thank you all as well. And I'll go ahead and disconnect.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you guys so
you,
much.
guys.
Thank you.